was a picture-perfect romance. The beautiful princess, handpicked by the most famous rock and roller who ever lived.
She'd been living in other people's limelight all her life. I mean, since she was a little girl. And, you know, married to the king. What do you do after that?
But behind the fairy tale facade were two flesh and blood people living a turbulent roller coaster life.
Elvis always had other women around, no matter how much he in love with one person.
Unfortunately, only one would survive. Out of Elvis's long shadow stepped Pricilla Presley, who kept alive the memory of the king. She became a television personality and a movie star.
It was the smartest thing in the world. She had the courage to take a shot at it.
And built a family legacy like no other.
She was a role model for me and very concentrated on that.
Pricilla is very, very strong. Anything that she wants to do, she's going to do it.
On May 24th, 1945, in the final days of the Second World War, Pricilla Ann Wagner was born in Brooklyn, New York. Her parents, Jim Wagner and Ann Iverson, had fallen in love 3 years earlier when Ann was just a freshman in high school. The young couple eloped as soon as Ann turned 18. But when Pricilla was just 6 months old, her father, a Navy pilot, died when his plane went down in the Berkshire Mountains. Ann was now faced with a difficult challenge of raising a daughter alone.
She was only 19 at the time. And then the shock to her that he died, you know, it was something that was never talked about even in her life. You know, she never had anyone really to talk about this to.
Then in 1948, Priscilla's mother met a young Air Force recruit named Paul Beaulieu, and the two were married within the year. He became the only father Pricilla would know as Ann packed away her pictures of Jim Wagner. Over the next few years, Pricilla matured quickly, helping to care for their growing family, as her father's Air Force career moved them from Connecticut to New Mexico to Maine.
For me, it was always that search of who is my friend, do I belong, do I fit in, when are we leaving, how close do I get to that person, because we did travel a lot.
In 1956, Pricilla finally found a home when the family settled in Austin, Texas. The strong-willed 11-year-old created a name for herself by aggressively campaigning against her best friend for the Queen of Del Valle Junior High.
The two of us were neck and neck on this, and I kept thinking she was going to get it, for sure, and she kept thinking I was going to get it, and I came out the winner.
But one day while babysitting, Pricilla made a discovery when she was innocently rummaging through family keepsakes in her parents' closet.
I started looking through pictures, and I noticed it was definitely my mother in the pictures, and I didn't see any of my father. I saw another man. So I looked in back of the picture, and it said Pricilla, Ann, and Jim. I then found a telegram that stated that they're sorry to inform her that her husband had died.
Confused and frightened, Pricilla ran to the telephone and called her mother, who rushed home immediately.
She honestly didn't know how to handle me. She tried to comfort me, but this was a huge shock.
I had intended to tell her, and it was just getting to be the next year, and just time was going on, and you just, you had other children, and it just passed the time.
In August of 1959, as Pricilla was about to start high school, the 14-year-old got some more distressing news. The family was being transferred from Austin to Wiesbaden, Germany.
It's a horrible age to have to leave. I mean, this is really the beginning of your teenage years. Your friends are the most important. I did not want to hear we were going to Wiesbaden, Germany.
But everything changed one day when Pricilla made friends with a young serviceman who offered to introduce her to the king of rock and roll.
He said, "Do you like Elvis Presley?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. Who doesn't like Elvis?"
Like a thunderbolt, Elvis Presley had taken the world by storm as no performer before. The rock and roller had sold millions of records, shocked television audiences with his gyrating hips, and was filling movie theaters with screaming girls. By the end of the 50s, America was rocking. But in December of 1957, Elvis had been drafted into the Army. The rock and roller was assigned to Friedberg, Germany, less than an hour's drive from Wiesbaden. With an open invitation to meet the world's most famous GI, Pricilla was determined to convince her parents to let her go.
She was our young daughter, was 14 years old, and it was an opportunity to meet a rock star. I mean, whether or not we approved of his type of music or his actions on stage, it was something a young teenage girl could remember for the rest of her life if she got to meet somebody like this.
When Pricilla walked through Elvis Presley's front door, the 24-year-old singer was relaxing in his living room with his family and a few close friends.
She was like a little doll, a little porcelain doll. And she walked in a room with all these guys. You know, I mean, had to scare the heck out of her because you could tell on her face that she didn't know what to do.
I was so nervous, and I found him very charming. He went over to the piano and started playing, but he kept looking over at me, you know, like trying to impress me. But he had a real charm about him, and I remember he did make me laugh.
Pricilla returned home that night, her head in the clouds, over her once-in-a-lifetime meeting with the king of rock and roll. When another invitation came a few days later, Pricilla could hardly believe it, and neither could her parents.
Why would somebody like him be interested in seeing a 14-year-old again? I mean, what was the reason?
And we were a little apprehensive.
Yeah, we were very apprehensive.
Despite her initial shyness, Pricilla was mature beyond her years, and her boldness impressed Elvis. The headstrong teenager persuaded her parents the fledgling relationship was nothing to worry about. But the Beaulieus laid down the law and insisted on meeting Elvis in person.
Not because we wanted to meet Elvis Presley or Vernon Presley, but because we wanted to know the family.
He was such a gentleman that evening. He was so respectful. And he was respectful of my husband and of me, and I was impressed.
As far as Priscilla's parents knew, Elvis was just throwing innocent parties with the local kids. But the high school freshman and the rock and roller were becoming infatuated with each other, spending many intimate hours together. Priscilla's complete devotion and emotional strength gave Elvis permission to pour out his feelings.
When I would go to his room, it was almost like a confessional. I mean, he poured a lot onto me as a 14-year-old kid. That was hard for me to really understand.
Pricilla Beaulieu was now leading a double life, high school student by day, Elvis's girlfriend by night. But as suddenly as it started, her fantasy romance ended. In March of 1960, only 6 months after Pricilla first met Elvis, his tour of duty was over. He headed back to America, waving goodbye to Pricilla from the airplane.
Elvis, did you leave any heart, shall we say, in Germany?
Not any special one. There was a little girl that I was seeing quite often over there. That her father was in the Air Force, and actually they only got over there about 2 months before I left. I was seeing her, and she was at the airport when I left, and there were some pictures made of her. But it was no big romance.
Although Pricilla waited anxiously for the phone to ring, she tried to move on with her life as a normal teenager.
Whenever she went out, generally I went out with her, double dating. I believe she was totally focused on Elvis. She had a hard time focusing on anything else.
In spite of his cool public exterior, Elvis had seen something special in Pricilla. Finally, after 3 long weeks, Pricilla got the first of many phone calls from Elvis.
And he acted like there was no time span at all, that he had just left me. And that, you know, how much he missed me, and that he thinks about me all the time, and how am I doing in school.
Sometimes I know in the morning at school, she'd be real tired, and she'd been on the phone all night with Elvis.
Over the next 2 years, Pricilla and Elvis spent hours talking several nights a week. The world-famous rock and roller cherished the innocent teenager's devotion and leaned on her for emotional support. They even began sending records to express their growing love for each other.
He would send me 45s, like Hey, Hey, Paula, I Want to Marry You One Day, Sealed with a Kiss, Take Good Care of My Baby, Save the Last Dance for Me. He would send songs. So it was a touching way of corresponding.
Eventually, the records and intimate phone calls were no longer enough for the infatuated young couple. And in the summer of 1962, Elvis invited Pricilla to Los Angeles. She convinced her parents to let her go on the condition that she would be staying with Elvis's neighbors. But no sooner had she landed than she was whisked off to Las Vegas for a whirlwind tour of casino nightlife with Elvis and his entourage. Elvis the movie star led a much more exciting life than Elvis the GI, and 17-year-old Pricilla had to grow up fast to keep up with the partying.
It was part of the lifestyle. You know, you go to bed at 6 in the morning, and you get up at 4 the next afternoon, and the whole group ended up that the sleeping pill was something that they all felt they needed.
Pricilla returned to Germany, but kept her adventures in Las Vegas a secret from her parents, while she and Elvis immediately made plans for another visit. When she pleaded with them to let her spend Christmas at his Graceland mansion, Anne and Paul Beaulieu reluctantly agreed. While in Memphis, Priscilla's love for Elvis grew stronger than ever. When it came time for her to leave, Elvis begged her to come back to Graceland for good. Pricilla went home unable to think of anything but Elvis.
I needed to be with him. And I knew there was no way my father would let me go. So I went to my mother and said, you have to help me.
She wasn't concentrating on school. She wasn't doing anything. No. She wasn't happy. She was moody. We weren't gaining anything by, you know, denying it.
Priscilla's parents finally gave in and let her move to Memphis. She would stay in Elvis's father's house next door to Graceland and finish her education at a local girls' school. As Pricilla turned 18, she was about to enter the wild, raucous world of Elvis Presley and would quickly have to learn the duties and responsibilities of a king's companion.
Great entertainers will continue in a moment. Entertainers continues now here on the Biography Channel.
You better move.
Why don't you move me?
In March of 1963, Pricilla arrived in Memphis while Elvis was still away shooting his latest film, Fun in Acapulco. But when he and his entourage returned home, Pricilla was immediately moved into Graceland and was swept into the party.
We were just partying all the time. I will tell you. We were always doing something, no matter when we were working or not. There was always people at the house.
So I'd be coming home about 5:30 in the morning, and then I'd be up at 7:30 to go to school.
Pricilla wore heavy makeup, false eyelashes, and a beehive hairdo that defied gravity to make herself look older and more sophisticated for Elvis.
And you know, it was horrible, because the higher it was, the better it was. And the more dependent you became on that hair. It was amazing.
When her high school graduation day finally came, Pricilla looked forward to spending more time alone with Elvis. But most days were spent tagging along with Elvis and his buddies.
We lived totally on his time. If you were hungry and we were traveling, we didn't stop to eat if Elvis wasn't hungry. If Elvis wanted to see a certain movie 6 times in one night, we watched it 6 times in one night.
I never really felt we had the time really alone together that we could have had or should have had. Not that I wasn't having fun, but you never feel like you had enough. You never feel like you had enough of him.
Elvis's movie contract kept him in Hollywood several months a year. Since fans preferred the king sexy and single, Elvis's manager suggested Pricilla stay out of sight of the press, 3,000 miles away at Graceland. In her absence, Elvis lived the wild life of a playboy, partying all night and conveniently forgetting about his girlfriend.
Elvis had a lot of affairs with co-stars. You know, a lot of celebrities in the movie business always end up dating their co-star for a long time. After the picture's over, pick up another one. That's how it goes. Pricilla did question about it, which is natural, but Elvis was a good talker.
Yes, he lied, and he was good at it. I mean, I could find proof, the evidence, a lipstick. Whose is this? Oh, well, you know, that's such and such. It's his girlfriend he had in the car with him last night. Oh, okay. Sure.
Viva Elvis, Viva Anne Margaret.
But in 1964, during the filming of Viva Las Vegas, it became impossible for Pricilla to ignore rumors about Elvis's affair with his co-star, Anne Margaret.
When this boy falls, he really falls hard. But who wouldn't when the girl is seductive Anne Margaret?
That was a very serious romance. When they first met, you could see there was something in their eyes. It really was. I mean, and it was just something that clicked between the two of them.
Priscilla's suspicions were confirmed when a newspaper reported that Anne Margaret had announced her engagement to Elvis.
Elvis was always just saying, no, it's publicity, no, it's, you know, it's part of the picture, it's not true, etc. And when it came out that Anne had said that, Pricilla was absolutely crushed.
And I went, you know, is that true? And he goes, absolutely not, it's not true.
By the mid-1960s, Elvis's career was in a rut. Although he continued to pump out crowd pleasers like Girls, 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 Harem Scarum, and Frankie and Johnny, the pictures became increasingly predictable, designed to sell soundtracks more than showcase Elvis's acting. And he secretly feared that he was becoming a Hollywood joke. The rock and roller was out of step with the hot new music of the 60s. Always Elvis's confidant, Pricilla felt helpless as he grappled with his sagging career. He became more and more dependent on prescription drugs.
I was so young. I really didn't know what to do to help him out of this mood of disillusionment, really. I mean, he felt defeated and gave up. His personality would change. He would start to become irritable. He would have temper tantrums. He would get upset over no reason. And I started looking at this going, God, this is just not normal.
But Pricilla stood by Elvis, and the couple's bond grew even stronger. One evening in late 1966, Elvis decided it was time to make a radical change. He wanted to settle down and put the wild times behind him. Despite pressure from his fans, he was determined to make Priscilla's deepest wish finally come true.
I was in my dressing room at Graceland. He knocked on the door, you know, and I'd open the door, and he came in, and he was on his knees, and, you know, he said, I want you to be mine.
Pricilla was thrilled to get engaged, but it was a battle to keep the wedding plans from the press.
So we made it a challenge for the press not to find out, so we tried to fake them off.
They felt certain that it was going to happen. It was going to happen in the desert. And in the middle of the night, we flew to Vegas.
Snuck out like a bunch of thieves, you know.
Got our license, was rushed over to the Aladdin Hotel. Again, all in secrecy.
So they went to her suite, and Elvis and those guys went to his suite, and
we got dressed and met in the hallway. He looked great. We hadn't slept all night, and both of us were so nervous.
So we had the wedding, then we had the cake, and all of the celebrations, and everyone was so excited and so happy that, you know, this had happened.
Priscilla had some stares in her face sometimes, so like, what am I doing here? You know what I mean?
We did it without the press really being able to ruin it. There were no outside pictures taken. There were none released. Everything was done under control. It was amazing.
On May 1st, 1967, after 7 long years, Pricilla was now Mrs. Elvis Presley.
We were married. It felt wonderful. It was my coming out, really. I had been hidden and a secret for all these years, and now I didn't have to be a secret anymore.
Still, Pricilla and Elvis yearned for privacy. The couple had bought a ranch in nearby Mississippi, away from Graceland and the press. They spent their honeymoon riding horses and hanging out with their friends.
We would have picnics outside, and there would be 30 of us, and they'd barbecue, and everybody would bring something, and it was a wonderful, wonderful time.
The newlyweds were also thrilled to discover that Pricilla was pregnant, and 9 months later, on February 1st, 1968, Lisa Marie Presley was born. Priscilla's dream for a normal family life seemed to be fulfilled, as Elvis was now her husband and a father. With his MGM contract ending, Elvis jumped headfirst into a television special with his band from the 50s. The show was a smash hit. Newly inspired, Elvis hit the road. playing a triumphant month-long engagement in Las Vegas, then touring across the country.
It was great because Elvis truly came out. I mean, it revived his whole career. The self-confidence that came out was unbelievable. And it put new life into the whole group.
Ironically, as Elvis's career came charging back, Pricilla and Lisa were slowly being squeezed out of his life.
At a certain point, everyone was married and having a good time. Then, after that, at some point in time, it changed, and only the women were married. And the men were out, and they were doing their own thing. The fans were all upset that he had gotten married and that their chance was no longer there for them to become the wife. It was hurting his career for him to be married and then to be a father. And everyone realized it.
By the age of 26, Pricilla was no longer the demure teenager clinging to Elvis's side. She was learning to cope on her own with a new self-confidence. And with Elvis on the road for more than half the year, Pricilla began building a new life for Lisa and herself at their Beverly Hills home.
I started creating a life of my own. And when Elvis would come home, all of a sudden he intruded on my life. I'm still, after all these years, living his life with his friends and his choices.
While touring, Elvis slipped deeper into drug addiction and continued to lie about his affairs. He and Pricilla were growing apart both emotionally and physically.
Nothing was going to change. Nothing was going to change. I was growing as a woman, and we had a different life now. We didn't have the same life as before. I got out in the world and realized, my God, I really don't know anything about the world. I lived in a bubble.
In Elvis's absence, Pricilla took advantage of her free time and began studying karate with black belt champion Mike Stone. The two also began a secret, passionate affair.
He was definitely a way out for me, there's no doubt. He opened up my world. He opened up a world that I really have never experienced. I got to do things I never did. You have to remember, since I was 14 years old, I never really had a teenage life.
Finally, in February of 1972, Pricilla confronted Elvis. She loved him deeply, but could no longer live with the man he had become. In an emotional argument, Pricilla told Elvis she wanted out of the marriage.
He was very, very upset. And, I mean, went out for weeks at a time, upset, you know, how could she date this guy? Could she leave me? How could she give me up for him?
He was hurt. He would call at certain times in the morning, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, threatening me, threatening the person that I was with.
On October 9th, 1973, Pricilla went to the final divorce hearing. Her heart broke when she saw Elvis.
I was so totally shocked at how he looked. He was bloated. He came wearing a jumpsuit that I've never seen him wear. I remember holding his hands, and they were bloated, and he was perspiring. I gave him a kiss and then walked away, and as I looked back, he gave me a wink. And that was probably the most difficult thing I had to do.
For half her 28 years, Pricilla had belonged to Elvis Presley. Now she had to find her own way, alone.
Great entertainers will continue in a moment. Continues now here on the Biography Channel.
By the end of 1973, 28-year-old Pricilla Presley had survived a difficult divorce and was in a new house in Beverly Hills. She was determined to branch out on her own and be a success both professionally and as a single mother.
She was definitely the force that grounded me, without a doubt. That was important to her, and she made it important for me to have the stability, the home life, the chores, the allowance, the groundings, the whole thing.
Pricilla found a way to bring her personal and professional life together when she opened a Beverly Hills boutique designing celebrity fashions and mother-daughter outfits. But even as she became more independent, Pricilla always maintained a friendly relationship with Elvis, centered around Lisa.
They were very much, you know, on the phone all the time, or he would come over and unannounced, 4 in the morning, and she would wake me up, and, you know, it was very, they were very connected.
Lisa's time was split between Pricilla in Beverly Hills and Elvis in Graceland. but her mother was constantly concerned about the lack of structure in Elvis's world.
She would feel nervous and worried when I was there because, you know, all bets were off. If it wasn't me, you know, running the golf cart through a tree or through the forest or through a fence, it was my father.
She knew she was very powerful because of her dad. If she wanted something and she didn't get it, well, you can't have that, Lisa. She says, well, I'm going to tell my dad when he wakes up.
Despite their divorce, Pricilla could not deny that she was still deeply connected to Elvis, and he continued to depend on her for an emotional support he wasn't getting anywhere else.
She knew he didn't trust a lot of people and that a lot of people were out to use him in some way, so she was always there for him.
Priscilla's relationship with Mike Stone was caught in the middle, and by 1975, they called it quits. Adding to an already difficult time was Priscilla's growing concern about Elvis's now uncontrollable prescription drug habit.
What happened to Elvis in his decline affected all of us. It was not something any of us wanted to see. How he became after the pills, you know, wasn't really him.
But nothing could prepare Pricilla for the shock she was about to receive. In the early morning hours of August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley collapsed at Graceland and died.
I called Priscilla in L.A. She, you know, broke down and didn't know what to say and just was in shock.
And it was a long time that I can remember answering him. It seemed like a long time. I may have answered him within maybe 10 seconds, but it seemed like a lifetime. It was unbearable, unbelievable, and lonely.
Priscilla's first concern was for 9-year-old Lisa, who had been visiting with her father. Priscilla rushed to Memphis to be with her.
Priscilla just couldn't wait to get to Lisa. It was such a tragic time, and Mr. Presley Vernon had taken it very, very hard, and I can remember people breaking down and us trying to make certain that Lisa was sheltered as much as possible.
Thousands of mourners lined the streets from Graceland to the cemetery for the funeral.
It left Priscilla without her armor. She lost her friend, she lost her husband, the father to her child, and she lost the security that he provided for her.
He'd been so much a part of my life. How do you go on knowing he's not there anymore?
Devastated by Elvis's death and searching for answers, Priscilla was introduced to the Church of Scientology by good friend John Travolta. Here she finally found the support she needed to get through this difficult time.
I started asking him questions about the church and the belief and the philosophy, and I liked it.
32-year-old Priscilla decided to build on the experience she had gained at her boutique, modeling. One of her first opportunities was with Maybelline Cosmetics.
They realized I had false eyelashes on, and they loved my eyes, and they said, you know, it'd be great. Would you be willing to take your eyelashes off? And I went, oh, my God, you know, I haven't done that in so many years. And that's when I started peeling everything off and taking off the eyelashes and unteasing my hair.
Then, in 1979, Priscilla was named executor of Elvis's estate when his father, Vernon, died. In the 2 years since Elvis's death, his music was slowly being pushed into obscurity as disco, punk rock, and new wave overthrew the old guard rock and roll. But Elvis Presley's image was becoming a source of income for anyone looking to make a buck. Pricilla was shocked that Elvis's fortune was quickly disappearing and began campaigning for the rights of celebrities' families. She fought the laws in several states for control of the rights to Elvis's likeness and won.
The law protected the rights publicity for the heirs of a celebrity, and it was a keystone of the future of Elvis Presley Enterprises but it really changed things for all of the heirs of all celebrities.
But Pricilla also had a personal interest in preserving Graceland and Elvis's legacy, and committed herself to saving Lisa's inheritance.
Pricilla was singular in her perspective that if we sell everything and everything's gone, what if Lisa comes to me and says, I have stocks and bonds in a portfolio, but I don't have anything of my dad's. I don't have his home.
And I said that it should be kept a home like Hart's Castle was, as if someone was still living there, and how really Elvis would have loved to have it shown.
She was able to find furniture that had been in the house before, and when Elvis and she were married, and when it was a very happy time for both of them. And she put it all back. It's like walking into a time warp.
Graceland opened its doors to the public in June of 1982. It was a huge financial risk, and no one was prepared for the response.
The first day we sold out, the second day we sold out, we just kept selling out. We invested about $560,000 to open Graceland and netted it back in 38 days.
Priscilla's grand vision for Graceland was a success, but the emerging career woman had more big plans in the works. Priscilla Presley was headed to Hollywood.
Great Entertainers will continue in a moment. Entertainers continues now here on the Biography Channel.
In 1980, Priscilla Presley landed her first major acting job, co-hosting a new television series called Those Amazing Animals.
We've gone around the world to film animals you've never seen before. We've recorded animals in all their incredible variety, and what we've learned, well, will challenge your imagination.
I loved animals. I felt that it was educational, and I felt it was a great springboard for me to get some experience.
3 years later, 38-year-old Pricilla reached another career milestone, playing Jenna Wade on CBS's wildly popular nighttime soap, Dallas. Pricilla showed up for her first day of shooting completely terrified, and co-star Larry Hagman didn't help very much.
She was playing a waitress, and I showed up, and this was her first day at work, and I had the most dreadful hangover I'd ever had.
You do want me to keep him from Ewing Oil.
I guarantee you, we'd all be better off.
Well, if anything happens between Bobby and me, it'll probably be a long way off.
Well, work on it, honey. You never struck me as the kind of woman to be shy about going after what she wanted.
Well, we'll see. Anyway, I have to get back to my shift.
You know, this poor girl, she was having to wait on me and carry the beer and do all the kind of stuff, and it wasn't the easiest thing for her to do, with me in not such good shape.
Dallas fans loved Priscilla as Jenna Wade, and in 1984, TV Guide named her one of television's 10 most beautiful women. But she was hardly able to enjoy her success as an actress because of problems at home. At the age of 14, Lisa had entered a rebellious stage and had begun experimenting with drugs. In her junior year, the teenager got deeper into cocaine and dropped out of high school.
You know, experimenting and being very wild and very careless and very rebellious and very uncontrollable. I mean, I put her through hell during that time period.
Lisa's always been a child where she really wants to make her own mistakes. That's tough on a parent. That is very tough on a parent.
With Priscilla's support, Lisa entered Scientology's drug rehab program, which put her on the road to recovery.
In the end, it was my decision just to stop it. You know, I thought, I can't do this anymore, and I was tired of it and done with it.
Tired of all the scandals and gossip surrounding her past, in 1985, Pricilla wrote her own personal account of her life with the king, Elvis, and me.
It was probably the toughest thing I ever had to do. I called the publisher a couple of times and said, I cannot go through with this. But I took it upon myself to go, you know, I have a responsibility here, you know, if not for him, for his daughter, and I will try to make it the best book I can.
Elvis and Me topped the bestseller list for 12 weeks and was later made into an ABC miniseries starring Dale Midkiff and Susan Walters. That same year, Pricilla met an aspiring Italian screenwriter, Marco Garibaldi. The two fell in love and soon moved in together.
It takes really a special kind of person, really, to really be with me. I don't know too many men who could really withstand a lot of the past, or the emotions, or the press, the myths. It takes a lot.
On March 1st, 1987, Navarone Garibaldi was born. 41-year-old Pricilla took on the challenge of a second chance at motherhood and loved every minute of it.
He showed me a world I never knew. You know, watching spiders, you know, hatch their eggs, getting chameleons and lizards and put them in little containers and give them names and then let them go.
You have children at a young age, you kind of grow up with them too, a bit. You all grow up together, and that was kind of how she and I were. We were experiencing life together. And now my brother and her, you know, she's got it figured out.
In 1988, Pricilla made her riskiest career move yet, when after 5 years, she left the cast of Dallas and began work on her first theatrical film. The Naked Gun starred Leslie Nielsen as a bumbling detective in a zany spoof of police dramas produced by David Zucker.
She got it immediately. Pricilla got the whole concept of, you know, not trying to be funny, just going with the serious acting and forgetting about, you know, where the joke was, although Pricilla was keenly aware of where the joke was.
Interesting. Almost as interesting as the photographs I saw today.
I was young. I needed the work.
First time I met her, when she came, we had a reading. Looked over and I caught her eye, and the moment I caught her eye, and like that, I went like this. And she looked at me, and then pretty soon she goes,
You're late.
that depends on what I'm late for.
I'm boiling a roast. How hot and wet do you like it?
Very hot and awfully wet. You seem to know your way around the kitchen.
I'm just as handy in other rooms of the house.
Once again, Priscilla's willingness to take a gamble paid off. The Naked Gun was a huge box office hit. She won rave reviews and was nominated for a People's Choice Award. But Pricilla Presley was just getting started.
Great Entertainers will continue in a moment. Entertainers continues now here on the Biography Channel.
Pricilla Presley's success in The Naked Gun propelled her to a new level in Hollywood. In 1990, she portrayed a cool and glamorous seductress.
Ford Fairlane?
Yeah. In The Adventures of Ford Fairlane, starring comedian Andrew Dice Clay as a rock and roll private eye.
Mr. Fairlane, I'm very rich. The kind of rich that warps minds. Nothing offends me. When I was 11, I walked in on my father and the Shetland pony he gave me for my 10th birthday. Does that excite you?
I don't know. I never met your father.
I just thought he was a funny guy, and I thought it would be a fun role to take on. It was different. It wasn't a huge role, but it was another great experience.
Although Ford Fairlane was a disappointment at the box office, Pricilla continued to show her range as an actress. Over the next few years, she teamed up again with Leslie Nielsen for 2 more sequels to the hugely popular Naked Gun series. But as successful as she was in acting, Pricilla still kept her eye on the family business. By the time Lisa was old enough to assume control of Elvis Presley Enterprises, the corporation had ballooned into an estimated $100 million entity.
I suppose life's a transition, and so this relationship between mother and daughter, that ongoing transition, has frankly been just perfect.
Pricilla kept close to Lisa at home as well. Lisa was now married with 2 children, and she and Pricilla enjoyed raising their families together. But in 1994, Lisa's first marriage fell apart. And once again, the Presley name was in the middle of a public controversy.
I've been in unusual circumstances, born into one and then continued to have them, you know. So when I go through them, she's fully aware of many aspects of those things, and I will call her and go, what in the hell do I do now?
If she asks my opinion, or if she needs my opinion, I will offer it. I will give it to her. I think that, though, she's really come into her own. She really knows what she wants.
After all the publicity surrounding Lisa's failed marriage to Michael Jackson, Pricilla realized that she had to leave her 27-year-old daughter to make her own decisions. Pricilla had her own life to live and still needed to explore new creative outlets.
I'm starting a record company, which I've wanted to do for a long time. I'm now working on a Broadway play. I'm working on producing a movie. So I'm at a place right now that I feel that I can now start something that I've wanted to do.
In September of 2000, Pricilla was appointed to the MGM Pictures Board of Directors. She is also involved in the Dream Foundation, an organization that grants wishes to terminally ill adults.
It's rare that someone will come and roll up their sleeves and get in the trenches with you. The hardest part of what I do is finding a voice for the families we serve, expressing the battle that they are experiencing. And Pricilla has been that voice.
Pricilla Presley has stepped out from Elvis's shadow and staked her own claim in the world.
If you think of what the world would have been like without an Elvis, then you have to think what kind of a world would the Elvis world have been without Pricilla.
The word grace rarely defines someone as it defines Pricilla.
She's a mature, bright, intelligent, eager, ambitious young lady.
She has a great sense of compassion.
Of course, you've got to understand that this is her father and mother talking to you.
She's just so down to earth. That's the surprising thing about her.
She walked on a pretty straight path and had her stuff together for a long time. And now, being a mother, I understand.
What a life to enter into when she was so young, and what a tribute to her, the things that she's accomplished. Do you do it, Sal?